Welcome to the Success with Jewelry podcast, where we invite you inside our conversations about business success and marketing for jewelry designers and entrepreneurs.
We're Laryssa and Liz, jewelry marketing experts with a combined 16 years of experience in jewelry marketing and proven track records on helping jewelry brands meet their goals. When you listen to or watch this podcast, you get an intimate and exclusive peek behind the curtain of all the things you wish you could know about earning success in this industry.
Welcome to episode 117. In this episode, we'll be chatting with Monica Stephenson, also known as iDazzle. She is the founder of Anza Gems and co-founding collaborator of Moyo Gems. Monica believes that gems can be beautiful and beneficial. We'll be discussing defining and sharing your values. In the bonus content, we'll dig deeper into this topic and talk about sharing your story authentically. To get access to the exclusive content as well as direct access to me and Laryssa, sign up by visiting successwithjewelry.com. Hey, Laryssa and Monica, let's get into it. Welcome to the podcast, Monica.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
You made such a good point in your email you sent me yesterday that this is a great topic for kind of the start of the year to be talking about defining values and sharing your values. But let's first start with an introduction. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and also both of your projects?
Absolutely. So I'm Monica Stephenson. I founded Anza Gems almost 10 years ago, actually. That just kind of occurred to me with 2025. I realized, oh, that's kind of a milestone. And it's a big milestone in a lot of small businesses to be around for 10 years. And I got my start in retail many, many years ago. And that kind of led to me starting an internet-based business in the late 90s, which then led to helping Amazon launch their jewelry business in the early 2000s. So I was kind of this tech and jewelry combo. And then I took a step back for a couple of years to have my two children. And when my youngest was about a year old, I started blogging. So that's when iDazzle.com, the jewelry blog, kind of came about. And that's actually, I think, how I met you originally, Liz, was at Couture, the Couture show. And as a result of the blog, I was able to kind of have these amazing conversations with a lot of jewelry designers, and fortunate enough to even go into their studios, and I went to the shows. But I found myself kind of more and more drawn to, maybe around 2000 or 12, 13, stories about kind of responsibility in the industry. I think I interviewed Jennifer Dawes, who was working a lot with sustainable, responsible materials. And it kind of set me on this whole new path, not just talking about the sparkle of things, but actually kind of where things come from and how did they get here and whose hands touched it. So I saw a random tweet in 2013 for a trip to East Africa in 2014 for a documentary film that was going to actually go to mines in Tanzania and Kenya and trace the journey of a gem from origin in the mine all the way through to the finished product. And I was incredibly intrigued, loved this idea. And I was able to actually, convince my husband to let me go. I had pretty young children at the time. And it's not hyperbole to, I guess, say that changed my life. So I changed from jewelry blogger and pivoted to gem dealer. And Anza Gems was kind of the result of all of this kind of cohesiveness going into a gemstone company that I buy the rough in East Africa directly from licensed brokers and dealers there. I have it cut in the US. And then when I sell things, I give 10% back to initiatives that support mining communities through education and vocational training and community development there, oftentimes through the 501c3 Gem Legacy. But that's kind of the Anza Gems sort of trajectory and business model. So it's a circular model that kind of gives back into those communities and helps them participate more in the global gem trade. And then that led to me taking many trips to East Africa. And along the way, I would see a lot of women miners kind of in the industry, but literally on the periphery, like combing through tailings of mines. But women were definitely present and in higher numbers than you would maybe think. And so I heard about a program with the Gemological Institute of America. GIA was doing an artisanal miner training program specifically piloted to the Tanzania Women Miners Association in the exact regions that I had been traveling. So I was very excited about this. I heard that the women miners were very super excited about what they were finding and much more energized after this education, which they had never gotten before. No one had ever really told them what they were finding, how to bring it to market. So I reached out to the NGO who was working with GIA and was like, well, how do I buy these gemstones? Like, I'd love to support these women who are working so hard. And I knew the gems were beautiful because I'd been to that region. So together we worked on a collaboration called Moyo Gems that brings these gems from women artisanal miners in Tanzania and now expanded to Kenya to the market. And we provide fair market access. And it's really kind of an unusual collaboration among a few industry partners.
It's also interesting to me, like having been in the industry kind of like alongside you and when you were starting this, because you really were a part of like those kind of first conversations that felt like people were finally talking about, the channels of where things came from and being transparent about it.
Yeah, I do think there was a real shift. There have always been a few people like Eric Braunwart of Columbia Gem House and Jen Dawes and some other people have been kind of talking. Christina Miller founded Ethical Metalsmiths with Susan Kingsley back in 2004. So there were early conversations, but I really felt that it's just been in maybe the last even like 5 to 8 years that the conversation has really shifted to it's not just a fringe topic anymore. It's actually important for people to kind of be investigating where things come from. And I feel like COVID was a big turning point as well. I feel like people kind of turned inward, like none of us were really sure when things hit the fan, where our business was going to go. And I think a lot of people started really looking at where did my materials come from? How can I do this more responsibly for myself in my studio, but also all the people involved in the process.
And I work with a lot of emerging brands, and it, you're right. In the past 5 to 10 years, or even like less than that, is when emerging brands started being like, I'm coming to market with the idea that I'm going to be sustainable in my business, or I'm going to think about where my gems are coming from, or I'm going to only offer fair mined gold. And we actually had Alyssa Thorpe from Mercurius, on the podcast to talk about the Tucson Gem Show last week. And she's another like huge voice in it, like a newer voice, but a huge voice in it. And there's so many of these great new voices coming into the conversation.
I have been so just encouraged and inspired by so many emerging jewelers who this is part of their business plan. This is actually, they would no more think about, not, not thinking about where things come from. Like that is such a huge tenet of their business. Like that is, I've been very encouraged by that and try to kind of help as much as I can if people want to have those conversations or need to have those conversations. There's some great resources, and I love Alyssa. I'm really excited to listen to her take on Tucson. We all love that gemstone crazy vortex in the desert.
Yeah, and we actually have also had Christina Miller on the podcast. Love Christina Miller. She has a great program for designers who are interested in learning more about sustainability. And we can link that in the show notes if anybody is interested. Yeah. But there's a lot of, not a lot, but there is education out there for anybody who's interested in that. But I think that, kind of in the broader scale too, it's like a value-based business in general is so important now, right? So how do you determine your values?
That is such a great question. And actually, just to kind of do a little plug for Christina Miller, that is part of this sort of like intro program is helping you kind of step back and actually kind of start to define your values. I do think that is an important part of kind of it's as important as any kind of vision or strategy or planning. I think is maybe really thinking about what drives you, what's the why behind your decision making. For me, like I realized early on, I had this epiphany of like a purpose driven business. I really wanted this. Anyone can, like, well, not anyone, but like you can be a gem dealer and not necessarily think as much about the origins. It can be all about, hey, I have beautiful 9x12 pink tourmaline for you to source. And isn't it pretty? It takes an extra step to kind of think about, okay, I really want to be able to not just have it reflect my values, but also be able to kind of pass along that story to my clients, to the designers who are actually going to use these materials. So for me, it was a gradual process. I knew I wanted to be purpose driven. I wanted to make sure that East Africans were participating more in the industry than they were. When I went and I saw how hard they were working firsthand in the dirt, and only realizing a small fraction of what the ultimate selling price is, when after that material changes hands, 7 to 10 times within country, and then again in the US, over and over again. And at every point there's value made, but the person who pulled it out of the ground is really making essentially pennies on the dollar. And so I really wanted to change that equation and kind of redistribute the wealth, which is why I've shortened the supply chain. And that's kind of how my values kind of work, is like, how can I make sure that everyone is successful, not just a couple of key players in the supply chain? So and then eventually, what I kind of found was really, really important to me was supporting women. And so I have a significant number of women facetors that we use for the gems that are faceted in the US, in addition to supporting artisanal women miners. But even like my photographer is I look for representation in every kind of facet of my business. And so I wrote that into my mission statement. And it's the lens that I kind of see through, values and mission.
That's such an inspiring takeaway, just in general, even for jewelry designers and jewelry business owners, to have something like that you're filtering all your decisions through.
And
I am.
sorry,
I'm
go ahead.
fortunate to have that, like, that filter, but I think anyone can find a filter that's like very meaningful to you. It could be something very, very different, but I think there's many, many possibilities out there.
Yeah, I'd say like for Laryssa and I, our passion is supporting designers. So that's why we do this podcast. But, Laryssa has different programs to support brands also. So there's different things. It doesn't have to be sustainability, although sustainability in this industry is like such an important thing to think about, and think about how you can be more, sustainable in your business and all of that. But, I think that what's important about what you said is you chose exactly like what lane you wanted to be in. You decided what was really important to you and you focused on that, because you can't do everything.
You really can't. And so I think there's as much value to that editing process of like, you could brainstorm what is important to you if you really wanted to kind of do sort of like a values, some sort of an activity. But ultimately, I think choosing a couple of things that you really want to focus on and that you can really feel like you can have impact with, I think that's as much a part of the process as coming up with like the terms to begin with. I think also knowing where to focus, and because that also becomes your messaging. And so I think that editing is really important as well.
Yeah. And to
Definitely.
what degree you're like leaning into that too, because I think sustainability can be a value, but like, are you leading with that story or or is that something that kind of comes up later in the conversation, you know?
And I have mentored a couple of emerging designers, and I always learn way more from my mentee than than I feel like I'm often giving as a mentor. But um, we've had that conversation of where, like, do you start, do you begin with that, and then every single decision kind of flows from that? But that's also really that's a tough decision, especially if it's something like sustainability. You can also start small, and maybe it's all about your craft. Maybe that's your lead option, and then you can start to find. It's also possible, I think, to discover along the path what it is that really resonates with you, and then have a vehicle for actually supporting that.
Yeah. And that resonates with the customers too.
It's really resonated with our customers, that's for sure.
Mhm.
I think that you do such a nice job, like kind of sharing that story. And there's a lot to it. And you have a lot to say on the topic, but you have really gotten it to a point where it makes sense and there's clarity behind it. Do you have any tips for designers who want to share their values in their business?
Yes. So I really feel like even 5 years ago, it was like not okay to talk about, anything that could be considered political or social justice, or there were certain topics that are like, no, 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 stick to business, stick to business. But I really feel like there's been this shift of, I think it's okay to talk about your values. I think it's okay to talk about what's important to you, as long as you're authentic and you are consistent. I think, that's not jumping on a bandwagon of like, oh, I'm going to post all the quotes today. Um, that's great. But I would hope, and I think customers can see through to whether your actions actually kind of meet that messaging.
There are so many different directions. And it's still important, I think, to be like really thoughtful about what you do want to stand for, because I think that we're all in this, especially the start of this year is like, what do we comment on? There's so many things to stand for. There's so many things to talk about. And I think that this is something I say to designers all the time. It's like, decide what you really like, what is that important thing to your business, and lean into that. And to your point, Monica, is like, back it up with action and don't just say things, but like choose the thing that you really want to stand for. And then with that clarity, you don't have to comment on all the other things. You could be believing in it and donating to it privately or doing whatever you need to do. But for your business, like, what is it that you are standing for?
There's always that line to walk, and I see some people walk it really, really well. I hope that we do a pretty good job. Like, I am very, very focused on East Africa and on women's issues, particularly there. And there's a lot of things that I might support quietly and personally, like on my own time. And I'm always reaching out to friends who might be going through various things. But I don't know that we're going to comment on absolutely every single geopolitical event or anything that kind of comes up, but we will try to support things that, again, align with our values and meet our mission. And then we're just very, very consistent about that representation. I think if you look through like the Anza Gems feed, like we're very laser like focused. I think we use stories to kind of like, that might kind of give us a little bit more of a rounded effect, where we can support LA right now, and we can, do some other things. But we always really stay true to, this is our mission, this is where we focus, and I try to communicate, these are the ways that we support these things. And again, it's a complicated mission and it's a complicated story, but I think that we've told it enough and consistently enough. And I don't take our clients, they're intelligent, they can, they can follow along, and they can figure it out.
Yeah, and I think that like just, value shouldn't be you can use them to like tell a story and they can be used in your marketing, but it should really come from like this why and like what you really care about.
And I think people really know and can sense. And again, it's like this consistency over time, the authenticity over time. When I post photos of me going and like, participating in the markets and what we do, I'm physically showing kind of the action part of like, words can be, cheap. And so you also have to kind of back that up with action as well.
How do you communicate some of this stuff to your customers? Because, we're talking about it from as businesses, from a marketing standpoint, but like, how do you find it resonates with like that end consumer who's purchasing the product, and how do you like efficiently communicate to them?
That's a really good point. We are wholesale, so we tend to sell to the designers and retailers who are using our gems in their creations. But we do have, we try to give all of the information to our clients so that they can continue that story, hopefully, to the end consumer. And we have had consumers reach out and say, I really love your mission. Where can I buy your gems? And then we can kind of like forward them to the designer or retailer kind of in their, hopefully in their geographic region. But even if, so much is done through, there's so many sales that happen digitally that's a very legitimate thing as well. But we try to really make it easy for our designers and retailers to be able to continue that story. So when you buy a Moyo gem, for instance, I can tell you the miner's name that I purchased it from at the market. And so I can pass along all, and I know exactly who cut it. I know the name of the cutter, where it was cut. So I can give you that information so that you can pass that along to the customer. I would love to even have a more formal way of doing that via blockchain. And we've kind of worked on some of these ideas of like being able to actually really track this and put that information in a very digestible way into the end customer's hands. And we're getting closer. It's not quite there yet, but I think we're moving that direction where there's more visibility, more transparency, and more accountability kind of at the end sale.
Mhm. Yeah, even if for whatever reason that got resold or given to someone else, even after the purchase, then that information kind of stays with the piece.
And it gives people a reason to buy us versus another brand, right? There's a lot of really beautiful gems out there. If what you want is something that doesn't come out of the ground, then we're probably not you know, your your gemstone dealer. But if you really care about, it gives us a way of differentiating our product from another 9 by 12 pink tourmaline, right? Well, we can actually tell you where it came from, who we purchased it from, who faceted it, and who ultimately benefits from it. I can also tell you we did this give back to this community, and now they're able to go to secondary education because we provided the scholarship for that. So it's a really it's good to have that from a marketing standpoint, but it also there's true impact on the other end as well.
What a good story. I mean, for the retailers and designers who are purchasing your gems, like what a good story to pass on to that end consumer. It's very cool.
Well, we unfortunately, like the movie Blood Diamond, even though it was very long ago and doesn't even apply to the same set of circumstances now, that civil war has ended, and there's probably other conflicts that we need to be more concerned about. But that narrative stays with people, the negative side of jewelry. And I think if you can give people positive reasons and say not only did it do no harm, but it actually is beneficial to this population, then I think we start to get into, otherwise, jewelry is a luxury product. We don't necessarily need it, although I would argue that the need to adorn is ingrained in our DNA and is a very necessary part of being human. But we don't technically need a lot of our products. And so to be able to kind of give people positive, beneficial reasons to shop for jewelry is always a good idea.
It's always a good idea. This is kind of a topic that Laryssa and I have kind of noted to like maybe do an episode about, but I wonder your point of view of like, I saw somebody post like, is storytelling like too much? Are we over storytelling kind of thing? Like, do people just want to buy? I believe that storytelling is everything. I think that that's like the most important part of a brand. That's why I buy brands, like value their values and then also the story behind it and wanting to support them because of the story and the meaning and the inspiration, all of that. But what's your take on that?
I would say that thank goodness there's some really beautiful gems that come out of the ground, because if all we were was the story, at some point there's a there's a finite life to that. Whereas um, the substance of what we're doing, like it's still really beautiful gems, and they're still really they're still really sparkly, and people there, I think you start to get a sense of like who wants to hear the story and who just wants to like try it on and say I'll take it. I think you do have to kind of straddle that line. It's there if you have the client who wants it and who needs it, but I think we have to also think like, is our product beautiful and necessary? Like, is it appealing? And then, besides that, there's all these other things that kind of you can talk about. So for the customer that it matters to, you have the backup of that information, but you should also, in my case, I'm like, are the gems pretty? Are the gems the right market price? Because again, there's a limit, I think, to also how much are people really willing to pay for this item. I think you have to kind of keep the market in check. You have to keep the market in mind. Even when you are talking about your values, you kind of have to know when it's important to someone and when it's all about the sparkle.
That's such a good point. This is a random question, but I'm just wondering, you're wearing like such a beautiful necklace right now. What
Oh,
color gems are you into at the moment?
am I into? We always do really, really well with blue and green, and I'm wearing a tanzanite,
Pretty.
and we always do super well with that. That's always like we know if we can cut aqua like as fast as we can cut it, we can sell it basically. But in terms of what I'm excited about, I think I'm really excited about garnet. Is just such a It's such an underrated gem, I think, and it comes in this whole variety of colors. So I really love these like blushy, sherry, like pinks and reds right now. I'm really excited about, but I know that our clients really like blue and green. So I think there's two different spectrums there.
It's been years that like blue and green has been like what does well. I think that's like always a winner.
I hear
I
that too.
It's as literally like blue and green, blue and green. What do you have? And so consequently we don't always have a lot of blue and green because we're small production. We have things cut in the US primarily, although we do have a small collection cut in Chiang Mai, Thailand, which allows us to do some calibrated gems, or smaller kind of melly size, which we hadn't really ever been able to do before. So it's traceable melly, which is really exciting. But we tend to kind of sell the moyos almost as fast as we can have them cut by our U.S. cutters. We only have women cut, women faceters facet our moyos. So it's a little bit of it's not a huge production, but we do sell it almost as quickly as we have it cut. So, but blue and green always.
Um, any other tips or thoughts that you want to share with everyone?
Just reinforce. I think we keep moving towards this idea of value-based consumers. Like I feel like I have two Gen Z daughters, and they shop a lot with their values and their, who is being a good ambassador for their brand, the brands that they follow. So there's the big brands, but then the small ones, like they really search out and find and support and want to support. Also, even recently, all the messaging around, supporting LA, for instance, um, brands that are putting their money where their mouth is and actually, um, you know, supporting things that are important to them or that kind of fit within their mission and values. I see that becoming, I think, more important, not less. It's jewelry is already personal expression, and then in my business, color is even more, personal expression. And so the idea that you could buy something that is not only representative of you, but also like from an aesthetic standpoint, but also from a value standpoint, I think I think that's only going to get more important. So I think the more you think about this and the more clear you are, I think the better we're going to be.
And
That's a
how
great
can
takeaway.
everyone get in touch with you? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Laryssa.
No, I just like that's amazing what she just said.
I know. It's like we got to wrap it up here.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
great. That was perfect.
Mic drop. I got nothing else.
Well, I appreciate that. I guess after almost 10 years, I actually, have some messaging I can deliver. So you can reach me. Instagram is a great place to kind of follow our journey. So I am at iDazzle, IDAZZLE. And my company is at Anza Gems, just those two words. And then Moyo Gems at Moyo Gems. So those are easy ways to kind of connect and see, like visually see what I'm talking about. It's kind of the personification. We have I have an amazing staff that um, really, I think, believes wholeheartedly also in the mission and values and then helps, communicate that message out.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
All right. Do you share your values? Let us know. Visit successwithjewelry.com. And if you love the podcast, we'd love to hear from you. Send us a message or leave us a review. Thanks for being a part of our community.